Hello. Um, these days I have been pondering a lot on if and how to cover this very complex issue. Uh, it's a very sad occurrence that war has been brought in Europe, and it's a horrible, unacceptable fact of life that so many people have to suffer. All this aggression that has been started by the Russian army is totally unacceptable. It has brought immense casualty and suffering on the Ukrainian people, and I don't think it can be justified in any way. It doesn't matter how much you are against another state's political regime. You never have to resort to these ways of solving your issues, and especially since Russia is a world superpower and it still has the will to be considered as such. A superpower has to be, first of all, very considerate of its actions. If such an aggressive stance is being put on people that ultimately did not have any sort of will to fight and damage anything that was of matter, it's impossible to understand. Although there can be many things said about the Western world and its failures in trying to achieve certain goals, it's certain that at least some of these countries have shown the best approach by being pacifist and trying to get over all those mistakes that were done in the past and everything that pertains to suffering of the others. And it's a very sad aspect that Russia still has not overcome all those grievances about the past, especially when all of these grievances are, to me and to others as well, completely baseless. Because ultimately what is claimed to be the right of Russia to have such a large influence on Europe is totally pointless. Everything that is related to Russia after the Second World War was an accident of history. And so any kind of condition you place on other countries to treat you in a certain way, from my perspective, is completely unfounded. And especially so when we talk about the freedom of a country to choose a specific way of governing, and of course international relations, because this is completely unacceptable. Everything that happened with Ukrainian, of course we don't have to take that as a single case. Unfortunately, Russia had many grievances with its neighbors, with Georgia, with Moldavia or Moldova, whatever you want to call it. There was always this interest on trying to avoid having any sort of breach in their sphere of influence. And while I cannot say that other countries have not made mistakes by trying to support a specific political regime or a specific geographical area, unfortunately there is a very distinct situation. I may be blamed for this, but I think that Russia should not have brought so much suffering to so many people as time went on. I mean, if you're talking about the United States mistakes, you have to admit the fact that Russia did just as much, or even perhaps more than that, with their entire military excursions. And all of these left some areas that are unstable. And all these unstable areas are bringing a lot of suffering for people that were involved. The conflict in Georgia was a disaster for the Georgian people. The conflict in Ukraine seems to bring the same suffering, and especially so you have to consider the fact that it was a peaceful country that tried to make a stand, and for that it was suppressed. And it's not the first time Russia has been doing all these interventions. When the USSR was still present, the intervention in 1956 Hungary should not have been forgotten. In 1968, Czechoslovakia was invaded by Russia, with a similar situation as in Hungary, the attempt at having a more liberal government. And for all this time, Russia hasn't learned anything about how it should cope with countries that have chosen a different path. They always brought their military might and suffering to a part of the world, Europe, that really wanted to have a different choice. And the huge human toll that is currently seen in Ukraine, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to stop there. And all the strong mistakes that have been done are multiplied by this useless war. And I think that in our current point in evolution, and I'm talking about the world society at large, we should be doing something else. We should be avoiding any sort of deep suffering that the war brings. And I'm glad to say that some countries have clearly understood this. I really hope that the situation in Ukraine is going to be better, but the biggest influence in this case is going to be from the international community. Just about anything that could be done by political leaders, by the population, anything else that can be a hindrance to the atrocities and the support that the Russian regime has, is going to be a true salvation of the Ukrainian people, and ultimately, I think, of an important part of Europe, because just about any country could be under the threat of Russia for pointless reasons, just because it's led by a person who does not have any care about people. It doesn't matter if it's their own people, if that's the Russian people or the rest of the world. And this sort of damage and irresponsibility has to be put in check. And I think that for everything that has been done in the last couple of years, the last almost 3 decades, since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, had and has to be considered very seriously and has to be ultimately punished, I think, because there has to be an agreement that is going to have to make Russia avoid any sort of such interventions in the future. And it doesn't matter if we are going to talk about regime change or anything that is going to be. But Russia has to stop making all these sufferings without any sort of base. And I think that this is what is going to matter a lot in the future. It's not the only aggressor in the world, but I think it's one of the few that shouldn't have been for a long time in this situation. And accepting all these intense threats and ultimately casualties that they are doing is only going to make us be worse off. However, I have to not dwell too much upon this. It's not the main subject, but I still have to consider that it was necessary to do such a video in the support of the Ukrainian cause. I'm not an Ukrainian, I'm an European. I live in a wholly different country that is not under threat by the Russian intervention, but still I think that it's having a massive, a disastrous impact on Europe and on everything that we stand for. I have to appreciate, however, and I'm saying this fully, the involvement of the international community. Most people of this world really want to have a peaceful coexistence, and I think that everything pertaining to the technological revolution and the chance that we have experienced directly or indirectly how the world looks, feels, and ultimately is, has helped us be much more considerate of this. And I think that just about any country, starting from the United States of America and going as far as Asia and thinking about South Korea and Japan, it's absolutely wonderful that you have sent so much support to Ukraine and the cause of freedom, because freedom in Europe and freedom in the world is going to matter a lot. And especially I think about all those countries that were near Ukraine and have shown massive support, because they also had a huge influence. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, a very important ally of Ukraine, Poland, which has been, just as the Baltic countries I mentioned before, under the threat and suffering of the Russian Federation for a long time on the Second World War. Romania, again a country that has been ravaged by the by the Second World War, just like the rest of, just like almost half of Europe, because Czechoslovakia again was today Czechia and Slovakia, Austria, Hungary, Italia, Bulgaria, a traditional Slavic country. So, and even countries like Germany, which was traditionally allied or traditionally an important partner of the Russian Federation, have been showing a strong stance against Russia, and this is helping very much. The United Kingdom, this country's response is also highly important, and was amongst the first countries along Poland, the first major countries to support the Ukraine fight. Turkey, a country that was traditionally an important partner of Russia, also has chosen to offer support. And again, I mentioned even countries that were far away, that loved freedom, no matter in what dire circumstances they were almost a century ago, like South Korea and Japan, have shown a very strong support. Australia again, Canada, Finland, which has actually fought a war against the Russian Federation so many years ago during the Second World War. Sweden, Norway, actually, I don't think there is a country that has not expressed their will to help Ukraine, and this is a fantastic outcome. I don't think that this can be understated, and it's absolutely required in order to show that war should not be part of what happens. And I have to agree that many mistakes have been done in Africa, and a lot of suffering has been done over there by various interests. However, I think that everything that happens in Europe will have an important impact on the entire world, because ultimately it's what makes most of the world to be a stable, peaceful, and thriving environment. Just like the Asian region is essential for many reasons pertaining to culture. Unfortunately, Africa was in a position that, and the South America was in a position where both of them were in a situation that could not make the best choices, and especially Africa was having a lot of struggles. But ultimately, it's a good testament that even there is some consideration about war and about the huge impact it has. And it's fantastic that we have reached this point, but we have to fight a lot in order to make the world be truly a much more peaceful place. And I hope that everything pertaining to the fight against this inhumane challenge is going to be over as soon as possible. First of all, for the Ukrainian people, and then for anyone that was in one way or another affected by this. And I hope that they can resist the invasion of an enemy that is so powerful and so inconsiderate of their lives. I have my whole gratitude to people that had the will, the determination to fight with such limited means. And I hope that they will see the day of freedom again coming to their land. This is all I have to say. We hope for peace.